So, William Tucker, right now you're talking to us from Albania. Why?
Um, I just happened to end up in Albania after COVID, as my wife and I were both on projects in different parts of the world. I was in the slums of India, and she was in South Africa. And this was the first place we could travel to and fly to meet each other after a year. And then we just fell in love with the place and the people, and we kind of set up as a home base in between, work in the slums.
Mm. So, you're known for your work educating low income, I don't like to say poor, children in India. And you lived in the slums for a year. And from what I've read, it's a struggle just to get water, or you can't send your kids to school because they have to wait in line for 3 hours when the tap turns on, and that kind of thing. What was your experience like actually living in a poor income area?
Yeah, so I purposely moved there, so that I could really get an on-the-ground experience and also see, okay, what are the real problems, right? Rather than from an academic viewpoint. Because it's really easy to sit in a university in an ivory tower and solve all the problems of the world, right? Um, but, on the ground is a different story, and you have to immerse yourself. So I purposely went and lived in a low income area so I could experience what the kids would experience and what trouble they actually run into. And it's amazing how resilient those children are. Okay, it's like a never-ending wonder for me how those kids, how much life they have, and how they like continue to survive despite all obstacles. Okay, and you're right. Getting access to education or school is hard enough. Um, but on top of that, if you're already behind, if you don't have your basics covered early on in school or early on in childhood, right? And you then come into the schooling system, which assumes you already know many things, right? You're lost from the start, right? And that is the real problem. Because I've done lectures and workshops at the top boarding schools of India and in some places of the world and at top universities. And I've dealt directly with children in the slums. And I've never found a difference in intelligence or innate ability. I've simply found the tools or materials lacking and the opportunity lacking, but no difference in the actual children.
Right. Well, let's go back a little bit to your own background to see how you ended up with this kind of interest, because your educational background is in tech, not in education. But let's start at the very beginning. Where and when were you born?
Okay, so that's an interesting story all by itself.
I can hear
Um,
that.
my mother is Finnish. My father is American. I was born in Brussels, Belgium. Raised in Holland, Denmark, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and only came stateside at about 17. Right? So I went to so many different schools as a child. I went to Montessori, Rudolf Steiner, and regular public schools, and later on a private school. So just my childhood experience, by force, I have experienced five, six different educational methods, right? Which I'll admit was really confusing, including having to switch languages. Right? So that's a struggle all by itself, right? And so it was some hard work getting through that.
And then where did you go to university?
I studied in the US, private university, majored in philosophy. This is, outside regular hours, and that just always kept up my studies, right? Regardless of where I am, I make it, a point to study about an hour a day, right? Delve into different subjects. I was very lucky to end up with a job as vice president of the research lab, which dealt in stable water cluster technology, right? So that's pretty up there in research and gets into the natural and alternative healing field, but trying to explain it through regular science, right? So even just the people associated with it, right, just broadened my horizon.
So how did you get from being a tech? Were you a tech person or a manager? How did you?
A manager.
So you weren't inventing in the lab.
I was coordinating projects, quality control in the lab. One of the really important things you have to do is try to shoot to pieces your own theories and discoveries, right? Because only once you cannot shoot them to pieces do you know you're onto something. Because it's super easy to get into a rut, and follow a favorite theory. Right? So those were part of my functions, including managerial.
For people who are in college now and want to study humanities like philosophy, how did you make the jump? Because being a manager of a business, a tech firm is really different, isn't it?
It is really different, right? And I also have my wife to thank to that, to a certain, because about 7-8 years ago, the war in Syria was happening, and my wife happened to be traveling in the Balkans, and she ran into this stream of refugees and children, coming out of a war-torn area, barely the clothes on their back, and coming into a snow zone, right, in shorts and t-shirts, and she wasn't having any of that, right? So she called and said, "This is what's happening," and I said, "Okay, good. You stay on the ground. We'll start helping those children." Right? And I somehow got involved. And I even flew down to help these war refugees. And we ended up helping 100,000 people that way, right?
And where was that?
This was in Macedonia, right? Part of the refugee trail, right? Where it turns from hot into cold. And after experiencing that, all the normal work just became boring. Right? Isn't like, there's kids out there, there's people out there, there's a whole wide world, and I just found real joy in helping others and being able to make a difference in somebody's lives, right? And especially when you help kids. The amount of gratitude you get back, there's no money that could represent the pay you get from helping children.
Then how did you get to India? What was the path?
The path is, so this is actually a 7-year journey. It's regarding like refugee relief and emergency aid. But one catastrophe or war would end, then the new one would start up. And it's just a never-ending cycle. And I started looking at this, and I started making many friends in the refugee relief field. And we saw that many of them started burning out after a while. And it was just a revolving door. And then I just, sat down and took a very good look and said, okay, what is the underlying problem here? Because no matter what, you fix one area and the new war starts up, a new disaster zone starts up. It's like we have a manufacturing line of wars on planet Earth. Right? You get really sick and tired of it. At least I do, right? especially when you see the amount of misery it brings to the normal people, and to the kids. So I thought, okay, well, what's at the root of all of this? Right? And just having interacted with thousands and thousands of people and kids, and seeing that the ones fleeing from the war, they have no clue what happened. Right? And there's just a lack of general education. And they always voted in the leaders, that put them into war or that lied to them. Right? So I really started seeing, honestly, why is this happening? Why is this happening? And you just really started to see that a lack of basic education, allows people to take advantage of other people. And if you get a really fundamental education when people can think, they can inspect facts, they can inspect information for themselves, right? It's a lot harder to fool them. But on top of that, they can build their own lives and futures. Right? And so, having kind of seen that, I started going to the slums, and we first went to a slum in South Africa and tried to pick some of the worst where nobody else goes. Right? And the slum is called Etwatwa, and that is Zulu for the word machine gun fire. Okay? Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. So, to give you perspective, no person from Soweto will step foot in Etwatwa. Right? They are terrified of the place. So I thought, well, that's the place I gotta go, because that's where the rubber hits the road, and that's where you can find out what the real problems were, right? And I went in there, together with my wife, right? Together with my wife, in shock, to see us there, and like they didn't even know what to say. The kids had never even seen somebody with a different skin color, right? But I went in there and I bought a carload of oranges and first gave just treats to all the kids, just kind of make friends. And in about 15-20 minutes I was talking to the adults over there. We were just having real conversations. Okay, so what is your life like? What are the problems you're running into, right? And you can see it. Because some chemical company is burning illegally their chemical waste right next to the slum, right? So you really get this stark reality of what it means to live in a slum and what the actual problems are. Right? And I would start asking, well, what do you think is the solution? And like, how would you feel help? And to my great surprise, one for one, they would say, well, if we could get education, right? If we could learn, our children could learn, that would make all the difference. Right? So that's how that kind of started. So I started in South Africa, and then I wanted to, had a good friend in India, and I went and visited India because he invited me. And I thought, let me take that opportunity to find out if it's the same problem in the slums of India. And again, I went into some of the worst slums and just started talking to people. And asked them, okay, what do you think the problem is? And again,
did you have a translator with you?
I had a translator with me. I had a friend, because I spoke no Hindi at the time. Now I speak a little bit. I learn it from the kids as I teach them. But again, one for one. It's like the answer was always education and literacy. This is what they wanted, and this is what they feel they couldn't get. And it was also obviously that they were not getting that. Had some projects in Latin America, and now I have a bunch of associates and friends who are doing little pilot projects around the world for me. But one for one, we always get the answer. No, it's literacy and education that they feel would help them. And even though they have nothing or very little, what they really want is education and literacy. And that's the one thing that's not being brought. So this is why you have a never-ending cycle of emergency aid. Because you're not teaching people to fish. Right? You're giving them a fish. Okay, that fish is eaten at the end of the night. You have the same problem the next day.
So, what kind of organizational structure, funding conduits did you build in South Africa and India? Because it takes money and it takes this organization to create educational programs, right?
This is true to a
This
degree.
is
You know,
true
we
to
have
a
a private
degree.
charity,
We have a
Charity
private
United.
charity, Charity United.
So it's all kind of funded by
So it's
normal
all kind of
people,
funded by
right?
normal people,
Moms,
right?
pops around the
Moms,
world.
pops around the world.
Small donations, big donations.
Small donations, big donations.
But it's very much like a private charity.
A private charity. And
we just make sure how we get so far is
how
that
we get
we buy
so far is that
only
we
what's
buy
needed and we buy
only
it
what's
locally.
needed and we buy it locally. Right?
And on top of that,
And on top of that,
I had to build a literacy
I
program.
had to build a literacy
So
program.
I built my own literacy program together with my wife. Because living for a year in the slum,
living for a year in the slum,
we started to see that the education system is not set up, right, to catch these children. Neither in the U.S., quite frankly. But especially where it's a dual language country, it is much, much harder. Because when they get to school, they get handed a grammar book. And just imagine this. Has anybody ever learned a language or literacy by being handed a grammar book? Let's look at the best teachers in the world. Moms. Right? They teach every child to speak. Right? And they do not fail. Right? And what do they do? They start by first building a vocabulary with that child. They don't worry about grammar. Because that's a much later stage of language building. That's your finishing off. And they first build a basic vocabulary. How do they do it? They'll point at the wall and say the word wall. Right? And they'll repeat it a few times until the child repeats it. And they teach a child probably 1,000 words this way. So do what mom does. Right? They have successfully taught every child to speak. Right? And then they come to school and some of them get labeled stupid. Not true. Right? Not true. Right? They've already proven that they can learn. There must be something wrong in the way we educate them. Right? So we don't start with reading and we don't start with writing because that's 2 steps too high. If I were to teach you a different language, Dutch, German, French, right? And I handed you a grammar book, or you handed me a grammar book of a foreign language, I would get nowhere, and you would get nowhere. But if we first give you a vocabulary of basic words, by interacting with the environment, this is a desk, there's the desk, right? And have the kid point at the desk and say desk. Where's the wall? Where's the ceiling? Where's the floor? You'll find out that in about 20 minutes, the child has a 15-20 word vocabulary. Right? On top of that, he's having fun because it's almost like playing hide and seek with him. And this is what I did in the slums. Get 100 children showed up, of all ages, that spoke not a single word. I point at the floor and say, where's the floor? And I'd repeat the word floor 5 times until they got what I was saying. And they started repeating me. Where's the floor? Good. Where's the sky? Where's the floor? Where's the sky? Where's the floor? Where's the sky? Where's the floor? Right? Where's the tree? Right? And the goat would walk through the grass. Where's the goat? Right?
And you were using English?
I was using English. Because I didn't speak a single word of Hindi at the time. Knowing the kids spoke a single word of English.
What city was this?
This was in the slums of Delhi. Yeah.
Oh.
Just outside Delhi.
I've been there.
And they were street kids that weren't going to school, but they loved it. And they would show up every day. And within 2 weeks, we had a 200-word vocabulary. Now we had something to work with. And then the next stage developed, which was okay. I need a little more vocabulary. It's a well-known educational datum that learning to read and then reading to learn. And you have to bring the child from learning to read to a stage of reading to learn. Okay, well, what does that mean? Where is that point? You need to get a certain amount of vocabulary into the child, a certain amount of understanding into the child, so that he can then start making sense of what's on the page. And for that, we have to redefine literacy a little bit. Literacy is not, can you sound out what's on the page? No, can you understand what you read? Right? Can you understand what you read? Right? And this is actually a Vedic principle that is thousands of years old. It's not can you memorize something, can you understand something. Because understanding and rote memory are two different parts of the mind. Anything you understand is automatically part of you, and you have no trouble memorizing it. Anything you don't understand, you have to put effort into memorizing. Right? So, this is why when building language, we make sure that words are understood. If I say cup, I will hold up a cup and point to the cup, so that visually the child knows, okay, the sound that goes with the object. And that's super simple. You can put 10 objects in a row and, okay, where's the cup, where's the fork, where's the knife, right? You do that 20 or 30 times. And the kids know it. They have understanding. It goes click at a certain point. Then we used flashcards. Just because that's also a really cheap way of having materials. They can be reused. And 20 food, 20 vegetables, 20 pieces of furniture, 20 types of vehicles, in order to build the rest of the vocabulary, so that when you start reading, they can recognize the words because they already know the words. So now teaching to read is much easier. Because they understand. You're teaching reading with understanding. And then the next big phase that came was, it was our Ollie the Elephant literacy program. What blocks a person from understanding a language, whether it's his own or another language, right? It's the small, simple words. Right? I take a word like and. It has three distinct meanings. But I ask most people this, and they go, "What's the meanings for the word and?" And can mean more than one thing, right? An apple and a pear. But and can also be used to show results. I work and get paid. Right? I run and get tired. It's a different meaning entirely. And is also used to show difference. He is a boy, and she is a girl. And is showing difference. Right? Summer is hot, and winter is cold. And is used to show difference. If you don't know these meanings, you don't understand fully what you're reading. And there's only about 50 small, simple words like this, which form the base of all English sentences. Right? It's words like in, to, as, of, right? And a word like to in English has 30 different meanings.
Wow.
Yeah. Right? So when we take, we realize that this is much too much information and needs to be spread out in an easy, simple manner, right? So that we can really get a person literate. So we start with the word at. We have the 5 basic meanings, but we have 5 different booklets for the word at, right? And each booklet covers one meaning of the word at, with 20 simple example sentences and 20 full-page illustrations, so you can see the meaning. And So you take one piece of knowledge at a time, right? And build literacy. So for the first booklet is where is all the at. At shows position or place of something. Right? That's one of the meanings. That's the first major meaning of at. So Ollie is at home. Ollie is at the gate. But this is all illustrated. So it doesn't need a teacher. Right? The child can figure it out himself. So we allow self-learning. Next book is At What Time, Ollie? At shows time. Meet me at 7 o'clock. At shows time. Third booklet, direction. Look at the wall. Or point at the wall. Right? And fourth meaning. At shows what a person is doing or how he is doing it. He is at work. Or she is good at dancing. I am good at singing. But again, 20 illustrated examples to really get that one piece of knowledge fully there.
How many booklets are there like that at this point?
Right now, I have 100, and I'm working on the next 100. Right? So it's an illustrated guide to real literacy and reading with understanding. And
are they all have Ollie the elephant in the title?
Yes, they all have Ollie the elephant in the title. Ollie is kind of our mascot it's just neutral. It's a cute little elephant. And we also do adult education. Actually, we have a project in Ireland because we find adults that have being labeled illiterate or functionally illiterate. All that's missing is, even in English, they don't know the meanings of the words in their own language. There's only about 50 words, because a word like police station, dog, train station, airport, these big words are easy to learn. But you ask a person, hey, can you give me at least 15 definitions of the word two? They fall over. They never even imagined that the word two had so many basic meanings.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Because the Western education system was destroyed at one point. We're actually operating on the Prussian education system from the 1800s, which is geared to make soldiers. Factory workers. People who do not question. Who just follow commands, who follow orders, and do not question or think for themselves.
Sit in rows, march in rows.
Exactly. Right? And for that, you need an education system that turns people into unthinking, unquestioning, and that's your test. Answer, you're wrong. Right? You failed the test. You failed the test. You failed the test. You failed the test. Okay. We need children to think. We need children to think. And for that, you need to build true literacy and focus on understanding. Right? And once the education starts to be focused on understanding, you get individual thinkers. Right? Now you get artists. Now you get inventors. Now you get a free people. Because the mind is freed up. But the mind will never be freed up if the person cannot understand what he reads, right?
This makes me think about the ultra-right political candidates and kind of cult of personality around some of them that's really prominent in the U.S. today, like in the senatorial race in Georgia. And would you apply the principle of not learning properly how to think is underlying the popularity of people who lie and cheat and are corrupt and say things that are crazy?
I would say so, absolutely, because I think people are basically good. You take any child, just good. Right? They're just happy. You look at the baby, the sunshine comes out of them. The happiness and joy that they radiate. It's unbelievable, right? But that gets destroyed at some point. And It's very interesting. When I work in the slums, and I get kids who are even a little older, but who have not been into a force-fed education system. They still have that brightness, right? And you would think, wow, how is this possible? Because they live in the slums in the worst conditions. Apparently, this has nothing to do with, or it affects their innate happiness or joy very little. And they are super easy to teach. Right? Whereas if I take a child who's already gone to school a few years into this rigid authoritarian education system, they're lost. And we can undo it. But they take twice the effort to return them to normal and understanding, because they've been pushed beyond, and have been beaten into submission simply by the tests, and forcing down information that they didn't understand.
Do you think that the majority of schools in the U.S. are, shall we say, guilty of not encouraging kids to really think?
Unfortunately, yes. We have this bit of a false narrative of everybody should get educated. What do you mean by education? What's the purpose of education? Everybody says, well, to get a diploma.
Or they say now to get a good
job. Okay. To get a good job. All right. So, is that the purpose of education? Because I have a different philosophy. To me, the purpose of education, whether the parent does it or whether the school does it, is to put a child into a state where they can pursue their dreams and achieve their goals. Right? Obviously, if you want to be a doctor, there's a lot of education to get through. But the purpose of education is to take somebody and give them the tools they need so they can achieve their dreams and goals. Because that's an education that achieves freedom. I can say you need education to get a job. If you don't get an education, you will be nothing. That's force and threats. And again, is that militaristic heritage that has crept into our education system. There's plenty of people, who have no education, who start their own businesses, who didn't get a diploma. Now, I'm not saying don't get a diploma or don't get an education, but we have to rethink where we're going. Because we need individuals that can think.
So if I wanted to influence my local school district, because in the U.S. educational systems are localized without a lot of state or federal oversight, what are tactics I could use to say, hey, we need to rethink what are we teaching kids? Are we teaching them to think? Are we teaching them to memorize for tests?
Good question, right? This is a hard one, because I've looked at that myself, right? Okay, how do I influence the schooling system, right? And in the beginning, you're like, wow. Where do you even get? So I figured, at this point, I am not so much trying to influence the schooling system as help individual parents, right? Because I think this needs to be a grassroots level. Because we've let it slip for so long that if you go up against yourself, against this established machine, you get nowhere. Right? But you can always find time to sit down 5 or 10 minutes, with a child, and help them understand something. You can talk to your neighbors. You can talk to parents. I mean, I'm on a personal mission, of changing education around the world, right? It kind of started in the places where education is so destroyed in inner cities, in the urban poor. And I deal directly with the parents, because the parents know, right? The parents are not blind. They just don't know what to do, right? And because they themselves have been put through that education system, they don't know that there is a different way of teaching because it's been lost, right? So, this is an ongoing process, right? But I think just telling people, okay, education should be based on understanding, right? And starting to stress that, the more you get that word out, the more the viewpoint changes in society. And I see this in areas where I operate, because I said reading should be based on understanding. If you can't understand what you read, don't bother reading. Tell me, what questions do you have? What don't you understand? But I find out that the community, within a few weeks, the parents in those areas, get very interested and start following and supporting it, right? One of the biggest lies that gets told about the world is that parents in poor areas are not interested in their children's education because they need to work to get food. Right? Absolutely not true. Never found it to be the case. I find the reverse to be the case. I find the poorest parents actually walking their kids to schools. When I set up a class, they guide them there. They have to get rid of the parents, because it's a little different in some of these areas. The kids aren't paying attention to me. They'll get whacked by their parents, because the parents are so concerned about their education. And so I gently get rid of the parents, because whacking doesn't make you smarter, it doesn't give you additional IQ points, right? And I try to stay neutral and gently, tell the parents, don't worry about it. We're working on understanding. And that takes as long as it takes for each child. But you'll get there if that's what you focus on. But my point is, they are so concerned about their children's education. Parents are so concerned about their children's education because they see the direct results. And I've had parents in slums offering money to tutor their kids, right? When I say money, it's like 50 cents, right? But that represents half a day work in some of and I turn this down, of course. But understand this, that they will sometimes give half their day's wages in the hope that you will teach their kids. So I mean, that breaks my heart. But at the same time, it tells me that how concerned those parents in slums are for their children and future. And yes, things are rough at times, but the actual love and care and effort that those parents put in, unbelievable.
Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani educator, advocates for girls' education. I think she says 135 million girls around the world aren't in school. So I'm wondering what you're finding about parents' attitudes towards educating their girls. Because in a lot of countries that are poor, it's like, I want to get her married off so I don't have to feed her, so I can feed my other kids, or I need her to babysit, or I need her to go fetch water for 3 hours, or whatever.
I generally haven't actually run into that. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't occur. And, girls do have a lower social status, in some areas. And I kind of fight that by using the teenager girls, the smarter ones, and I make them assistant teachers, right? So I give them status and value simply by letting them be part of the education process, right? And it's part of the things I do in slums, I try to get the girls, you know, and make them teachers, make them part-time volunteers, so they become the educators, right? And that raises their status immensely. So I try to give them a little extra freedom like that. But some of these ethnics are hard to change overnight. And the environmental circumstances, right? Like life is harsh in those areas, right? So when you're in the West, it's very easy to condemn certain behaviors or morals or attitudes, right? All I can say is it's really easy to talk about morality when you're not hungry, right? Have a starving baby. Be starving yourself. And then walk by an apple cart where the owner isn't looking. Right? Now we can discuss morality. Right? But as long as you have a full stomach, let's not talk about the subject. Right? Because it's a different, that's when you get tested. Right? And that's, so it gets harsh, right? And we in the West don't understand that.
Well, I would steal food if I was starving and my child was starving. I'd steal food in a minute if I could to feed them.
And I wouldn't blame you. Right? It's different. Right? It's I tell you, like one of my female or my girl tutors not show up, right? And then I go find out what's happening, right? Find her, in bed at home with a huge infection, right? And luckily I worked at a natural health research and had a first aid trade myself. Like, wow, this needs attention right now. But they were just waiting for this infection to disappear. When she would have gone into sepsis the next day. 50 cents of the right antibiotic was all it took to turn her around. Right? 50 cents. Nobody had that 50 cents. I did, and I happen to know, and I have a lot of doctor friends that I can call on, right, around the world. So 2 hours later, I had her the right medicine. But that's the harsh reality. Had I waited one more day, I don't know if she would have been alive. Or she would have lost her leg. So we're not used to that type of level of survival. So then it's easy to speak about concepts of equality and this right and that right. It's really hard work to try and just improve the rights, even just a little bit in some areas. Because the environment is so demanding, right? You don't have the resources, right? And if the mother doesn't work, if she doesn't go to the field, if she doesn't walk those 6 miles to get water, or if the dad doesn't, then nobody eats. But I tell you, even when the girl's getting married on, the families cry, the dads cry, right? Oh, they find it really hard to, they are so concerned, right? About the welfare of their children. This is not something that is happily done. This is done out of necessity. Right? I've been to a few of these weddings, right? And you have to go console the dad, right? Because he's heartbroken that that his daughter is gone, right? So it really is, there's two sides of the story. You have to immerse yourself to fully understand.
Yeah, the other side of the girls' education coin is that around the world, except sub-Saharan Africa, young women are the majority of college students. In the U.S., they're 60%, young men are 40%, and people are talking about a boy crisis. So I wondered what your observations are of why more women are in university, which means they'll be in pipelines, professions and graduate school and having that kind of influence.
Well, first of all, I'm really happy about this this statistic, right?
This statistic,
like a real measure of
we
much
move
more towards equality.
Right?
As boys, there's a real shortage of manual professions, of artisans, right? Because for so long, we've pushed theoretical degrees, and this is becoming a real problem. I know in the US, where now some of the professions that used to be manual labor are now high-paying professions, like a plumber, electrician. And I've done those things myself as a youth. And boys, I think, tend to gravitate towards physical things a lot more, right? I'm a boy or man, whatever. I much rather be doing something wild, right? My wife likes to do things that are very calm, So there is a difference in outlook in life. I noticed. In life, I know middle ground. Where we certain things that we do together, and certain things she does, and certain things that I know now don't invite the wife along with this because she has no interest in standing on the edge of that cliff and seeing how far down it is.
So the girls are in university because the boys are thinking, I'd rather not get a college debt and be an electrician and make a lot of money right away.
It's one of the routes. There's a lot of jobs in the labor market, that are physically intensive, right? And some people really like that type of work, right? In my teenage years, I used to help on work sites, right? It was the most wonderful experience of my life, right? Learning to build stuff, right? But it's very heavy work. That's just physically, more demanding. So you have these differences, different body type and different body structure, where you'll see majority in one profession. Gender-wise, simply, because guys like carrying bricks. It's like going to the gym, right? And some bodybuilders take carrying jobs. You know what I mean? Because this supports their hobbies and gets them to where they want to be. Right?
I wonder if that in any way applies to the ongoing war. Is that there's that kind of physical comradeship, adrenaline rush, challenge, shooting the target, being a hunter, a warrior. It may be part of, testosterone. I don't know. Do you think that applies to why we have like the war in Ukraine and people sign up as mercenaries to go fight there?
Well, I think you have a point. I think as a guy or a man tend to, they have more testosterone. So they are in general more adrenaline seeking. Right? Not that wrong for either gender, you understand. And there's plenty of girls that seek adrenaline as well. This is not my point, right? But guys tend to get into a fight much easier, right? I mean, you see this with football clubs, with sports, right? There's always like a group of guys, that goes there just to have a good fight. Right? At least in Europe, you know what I mean? At least in Europe, hooligans,
Netherlands,
I've been in plenty of European countries where, the other sports clubs. Okay, yes, you go there for the match, but there's a certain group of guys, and it's guys, not girls.
Not
They
girls.
go there to have a good fight afterwards.
Right? So,
Oh, you go to the pub and drink and fight?
So whether it's right or wrong, I'm not commenting on that, but that is a phenomena that we observe. It is a social, a social phenomena we can see. So I think those things do matter. And they do play a role. Now, I'm not judging it one way or the other. But it's there to be observed. So why deny it? Then again,
Why don't you say a word about Charity United? If people want to donate to it, also say a word about where people can get Little Ollie books and learn more about your teaching methods.
Okay, yeah, I have a charityunited.us/gift. I have a little illustrated grammar booklet. And this is one of the. I also teach grammar afterwards, but I really simplified it because I find that most children think grammar is daunting and they get really stuck. So I made a little illustrated grammar book. This is a free gift to your listeners. charityunited.us/gift. They can pick up a free illustrated grammar booklet, and you can use that to help any child who wants understand grammar better. Okay? charityunited.us is my website. You can see some of the ongoing projects over there. If you can donate. If not, everybody is doing their own good thing in the world, right? And everybody chooses to help how they can. So, my advice along that line is you can always make somebody's day better, even with just a smile. Right? And if that's all you can give, that is the perfect gift.
Are your books available online through Charity United, or how would people get the books?
The books I have separately at claritylearningcenters.com, and that's where they're for sale. And that's how I fund my work in Islam as myself as well.
So it's charitylearningcenter.com.
Clarity Learning Center.
Oh, CLARITY.
British spelling, Centres, TRES, because it was made in India. When I was over there, and that's where they are.
So it's Clarity Learning Trust?
Centers.
Yeah, where is
it? The center, the British spelling of center is centres, right? The R is before the E in the British spelling of center.
Oh, right. Yeah, like the French.
Exactly. So, and that's where you can find all of the elephants.
Got it. This is a little off the subject, but I'm really curious about that. India got its independence in 47, China, the Maoist revolution in 49. They were probably both about the same in terms of their poverty and educational or literacy levels, but now I think it's fair to say most people in China are literate. In India, a lot of people aren't. Do you have to have a dictator to get people educated en masse?
Actually, you have to go a little earlier in history to understand this, right? Because there's two entirely different routes for China and for India. India actually had one of the best education systems in the world up until
under the Brits.
Before the Brits.
before the Brits,
under the up until
up
1826.
until 1826.
And then the British actually did a study because they were losing control of India. And and this is a published study which you can find online. But they found out that the only way that they could keep a hold of India is if they destroyed its education system that was in place. This education system was called the Gurukul system. Guru, which is Hindi for teacher, kul, place, a place of teaching. And the Gurukul system, they had schools in every village. And the entire principle of this schooling system was education based on understanding. And this is why India, even at that time, had 20% of the world's production. It was the richest nation in the world. It was actually the most literate nation in the world. But to keep control of this nation, to keep it as a subject of the British Empire, they realized they had to destroy its education system. Right? So the entire original education system of India was destroyed over the course of a century. Okay? And then a British education system was instituted, but that didn't even cover 1 in 100 of the children. You understand? So there's a real falsehood if you look a little deeper. Right? The actual, existing education system was wiped out, and only a small percentage of it was put back. So you have 100 years of lost education. Okay? And that's far harder to fight back from, or claw back from, than having your regular education system in place and switching government type.
But China has done much better in feeding, housing, educating its people than India, wouldn't you say?
I don't have enough on-the-ground statistics, right? To look at that. I tend to. When you actually go places, you always find it's different than any other place, and I will tell you that in India, the government, the culture, does a lot to feed the hungry. Okay, I mean, there's so many temples. Like you do not have to go hungry in India. Right?
I know the Sikhs feed people in the Guru, but I didn't know that Hindu temples did a feeding program.
There is so many temples. Sikhs, it comes like in the Muslims, right? It's like Christians do it. Like just about any religion or social group has feeding programs, right? And it's government as well. But China also is a single language country. Right? Well, they have
dialects.
It has dialects. Right? And in India, you're like the official language was English.
Right?
But then you have 21 other languages. And so you're looking at a territory. If you change the entire schooling system to a different language, right? You set a nation back. Let's say we came to let's say tomorrow we said, all right, all schools in the United States have to teach in French. And the only way you can get an education, or you can go to school now, is if you learn French. Because all the books are in French. Right? So that's going to have a centuries long effect. Right? Because everybody now has to study in a different language than what they natively speak. Right? and you get a
right?
weakening of the
And you
native
get a
language,
weakening of the native language,
you have a
and
weak version
you have a weak
of
version
the language
of
that's being
the
taught
language
in,
that's being
right?
taught in.
And I think
Right?
that's
And I
a
think
far
that's
bigger
a
factor
far
than,
bigger
you know,
factor than,
who's doing
you know,
what.
who's doing
Right?
what. Right?
It's the complication
Complication
of the system.
of the system.
Right? Because if you're going to teach language, it should be a language class.
It should be a language
right?
class.
And that language class should only teach language. Right?
Language.
You don't
Right?
go and
You
learn
don't
physics in Russian to learn Russian.
to learn Russian.
Right? Because that's mixing
Right?
two
That's
subjects,
mixing
and that's too
two
much.
subjects, and that's too
And
much.
that is more the
And
problem.
that is more
you know?
the problem. You know?
That. You know,
that.
well, I can tell you,
know,
like kids from the
like
slums, you know, I have a
kids from the
14-year-old,
slums, you know, I have a 14-year-old,
and he can study in his native Hindi
study in his
language
native
up until he's
Hindi
14,
language
but
up
then
until
in
he's
15 and
14, but then
16
in
class,
15
all of a sudden his
16
books
class,
changed
all of
to
a sudden his
English.
books changed
Right?
to English.
And when I met
Right?
the kid, he spoke no English.
He spoke
But
no
now,
English. But now,
you know, all of a sudden he's having to study physics
he's having to study physics
in English. He was
in
doing
English.
great in
doing
physics,
great in physics.
you know, that year.
You know,
and
that year.
Passed
And
flying colors.
Passed flying colors.
Now in his new year, he's
Now in his
completely
new year,
lost in physics.
completely lost
Not
in
because he
physics.
doesn't understand the subject of physics, but now his physics books is in English.
Physics books is
Right?
in English.
He can't understand
Right?
English.
He can't understand English.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
Right? So it's a much
So it's
wider
a much
scope. And you have to
scope.
really...
And
I
you
didn't
have to
know
really-
this. I found
didn't
this
know
out
this.
late
I found this
into
out
my
late
program.
Into my
right? And I was in
program.
shock.
Right? And I was in
No
shock.
wonder those kids are having such a rough time the moment they hit, you know, 14, 15.
14,
Because
15.
the language they study
Because
in
the language
changes.
they study
They're
in
not set up.
changes. And they're not set up.
That's really challenging.
Right? So the problems
Right?
that we perceive, you know, when you go on the ground, turn out to be entirely different problems than we think they are.
Problems than we think they are.
I want to kind of wrap up here and ask you if we've left anything out. I'm sure we could talk for a lot longer. But before, I wanted to ask you what your wife's background is. Is she an educator, a social worker? How did she get
She's also an
into being your
educator and
partner?
a social worker,
and a social worker,
Is she trained as
Oh yeah,
those?
she's
or
a child
what's
counselor.
her training?
She's actually ran an independent boarding school at one point. So she is far more precise than I am. Right.
Is she American
she's
or what's her
American.
nationality?
yes, she's American.
She went to a private school in the United States.
States.
But she's traveled.
But
right?
she's
I mean,
traveled.
She speaks Russian, Spanish, and a few German, a few other languages, about 4 or 5 languages myself. Right? So, and I think like that world traveling is what gives you perspective. Right? Because you find out the people that you read about or that you think or hear about in the news that you think are strange or weird. You find out that actually everybody's the same. Right? Find out that in that part of the world where you thought you had to be scared, there's moms and pops and bakers, right? And all they want is for their children to do well. And they're friendly, outgoing, and they'll help you. Right? And so the average person out there in the world, no matter what culture or what race or what race, it's a mom, it's a dad, it's an uncle, right? It's a baker, it's a farmer, right? There isn't this big earth terrorist from an area. No, the vast majority are wonderful people, wonderful souls, but you wouldn't know this unless you travel, right? Because I've gone to places where I thought, okay, I'm going to be, I should be really scared when I'm there because I hear how dangerous it is, right? I get there. And it's just moms and pops, just like us, just trying to make their kids survive and trying to do their best, to make things good in their area.
Great. Thank you.